Welcome to tonight's webinar on planning and organizing technology, or planning and organizing for technology integration with Classpad.net. My name is Amy Chow and I will be moderating tonight. For the sake of webinar quality, we're keeping everyone muted and all videos turned off. If you do have a question, you can type it in the chat panel and I will either respond back or ask Karen, our presenter, to stop and respond back to the entire group. And so just a little bit of background about Karen and I. I am the National Training and Product Manager for Casio's Education Division. My primary responsibilities are coordinating workshops for schools, districts, and conferences. I'm working with our development team on calculator updates and improvements.
And I am Karen Greenhouse, and I've been a math educator for over 30 years and currently work with Casio as their spokesperson, and I do, workshops and training and things like that. And I also am a professor online at Drexel University. And Amy, what's the next slide, or is it going to me?
It's going to you.
It's going to me. All right, so I'm gonna stop Amy and share my screen, if I can find my screen. There it is. Okay, so what do you see, Amy? Hopefully what we're
I can see your slide, yep.
Okay, so let me those of you who've been joining us for the last, how long have we been doing this, since April? I'm actually going to share my video because it's going to be a lot of me talking and it's a little less interesting unless you have your video up. So I wanted to do this because school is starting for some, and I know school is starting kind of crazy for a lot of people. And I have worked with technology in mathematics since 1998 when I found Sketchpad on some computers in my classroom. And it has been a passion of mine, is how to help teachers integrate technology into classrooms, whether that's a calculator or, software or something like that. So I know, especially now where everyone is having to teach remotely and online, and how do you integrate and make math exciting, I thought this would be a good way to kind of help prepare some teachers for that. So I'm using Classpad, but really what we're going to first talk about, we're going to have a conversation about technology and what does it mean to integrate effectively. So it could be for any technology. So I am going to, at the end, we're going to actually do some Classpad.net stuff. So I'm hoping everyone got my little email and the little blurb at the beginning to have signed up for an account, because I'm actually going to ask you to go into your account and work with me to show you how to set up folders and think about your planning. So before we begin, I kind of wanted to get to know who you were. So I'm going to send out a poll to everybody real quick. So if you could just respond quickly. Hopefully, it's hard to come up with all the different answers, but everyone should see the poll. Who are you? I just kind of want to know who's in the meeting, so I kind of have a sense of how I should kind of gear things. Or do I have teachers? Do I have coaches? Those types of things. So I'm pretty excited. I'm seeing the teachers coming up right now, for the most part, former teachers. Give me a couple more minutes. I'll share this once it's all done. All right. So not everyone's responded, but I'm going to stop it just so that we can move on. So here's just the results, just so you can see. And thankfully, it's a lot of teachers or former teachers or consultants. So that is exciting for me because in some way you're probably still supporting or you're in the classroom yourself. And so what we're doing today is going to be hopefully very relevant or helpful for you with your work with teachers or in your own classroom. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And next thing, I'm going to send you another poll. Since this is such a strange year, and especially those of you who are in the classroom or going back to school districts, how are your schools opening? Because I know it's a different model, so I just kind of want to get a sense for that. So I'm going to send the second poll and then we'll move on. So how are your schools, either the school you're teaching in, or if you're not in a school, the schools you're working with, or the school district you live in, just how are they responding? And the results so far are not at all surprising to me. Remote seems to be, remote or hybrid are our options here. All right, I'm going to end the polling, let you see the results. So this is not surprising in the district that I live in as well. They are doing a hybrid model. Parents got to vote what kind of model they wanted to use. So they could go hybrid, they could go remote only. There was no option for face-to-face. So there's some kind of weird system. I don't have kids in the school district anymore, so I wasn't super into it. All right, so obviously then technology becomes really more important because people are teaching remotely. So we're using technology to deliver. So how can you change that and integrate mathematics technology, whether that be calculators or emulator software or dynamic software or math apps, those types of things. So that's sort of where we're going with this. So I'm going to ask you, and this time I'm going to ask you to respond in the chat panel so everyone can see the answers as we're going along. But so technology integration in math, we hear it a lot, but real quick, what does that mean to you? When you hear that, integrating technology into mathematics, what does that mean to you? Because I want to make sure we're on the same page before we kind of move on. So in the chat panel, if you can pull it out, just type a brief answer of what you think that means to you. Hopefully everyone has their chat panel out. If not, you're just going to hear what it means to me. So more interesting if we hear from everybody else. All right, so using technology to explore math connections, support teacher instruction and student practice. I really like that, Tom, using different representations. Great. All of the above. Good answer, Michael. I love it. All right, so for me, technology integration means you are somehow integrating some tool that, and technology can mean, you know, a compass and a protractor, but you're using some type of tool to help students better understand the mathematics, see the mathematics, explore the mathematics. So you're not just talking at them, right? So technology, and there's lots of things that are considered technology, but as you all have said, it's using it to teach math skills or to see math or to understand a problem or to represent it differently. Next question. And I want you, if you're in the school, I want you to think about your own school. If you are working with different schools, I want you to kind of think broadly, but how would you say the math teachers that you interact with, whether they're in your classroom or you're coaching them or you've run into them, they're your students, your children's teachers, how would you say that math teachers are currently using technology, integrating technology in their math class? What have you seen? So just let's get a couple, again, in the chat panel, a couple answers. Okay, true, Tom. A lot of teachers I work with. Okay, so calculators is definitely something that I think a lot of us see in the math class. Thank you, Dawn. And Trudy, you are correct. They all are, especially now with remote, we're all using technology, but some not as effectively as it could be used. That is very true. And Amy makes an excellent point. Videos, okay, so videos are they're a great tool in math class, unless you just have the students watch them and don't ask them questions and don't have them do things and, you know, problem solve. Right, so textbooks, I like that. I like Amy's answer, online textbooks, and there's great ways to use it, great ways not to use it. Just using it as a reading tool is not technically integrating very well, but there's some great math textbooks out there. Kendall Hunt, the Discovering series, they have integrated technology into all their lessons. So they have the textbook, but then there's places for the students to go do things. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. So good and bad. And teachers right now, we know, are learning kind of on the fly, right? They were forced into this remote learning. Hopefully this summer, some are trying to gain some interesting insights and try new tools that they can make the online experience more engaging. Last question, I promise. So your answers, they just use it online or they use it for assessment and they use calculators. What other factors do you think might impact technology integration in math? Like what's preventing a teacher from using it or using it effectively in a classroom? What are some factors that you think might be interfering with them? Okay, that's probably a big one. Dawn has pulled up a big one, knowledge of how to use it. So a lot of teachers avoid using certain technology because they don't know how to use it themselves, so they certainly don't want to use it with their students. Tom's made an excellent point as well. They sometimes are reluctant to learn, so they don't want to have, because they don't have to learn something else. It's already hard enough to get through your curriculum. Not understanding how to use it. Excellent point, Michael. So there's so many reasons, and this is actually what I did my doctorate dissertation research on, was what are the factors that impact technology. And a lot of times it's not that they don't want to necessarily, it's that they don't have the training, they don't have the support. So maybe they did get some training, but then the principals, this is just some things I found in the work I was doing, the principals come in and are like, well, why are your kids in groups and why is it so noisy? You should be doing the curriculum. So they're not supported in their use of trying to use the technology. So there's lots of different reasons, right? Student knowledge, afraid the students know more, those types of things. So lots of different factors that impact it. And so in order to integrate correctly, you really have to know what is it we have, what do we need the teachers to do, how do we support them? So right now in a remote learning environment, if we want teachers to, say, use a calculator emulator, we need to make sure they know how to use it and how to use it effectively. So we need to be helping them and training them and supporting them. So one big factor is the access to the technology. So think about the schools that you are in, or the schools that your children are in, or the schools that you work with. And this is my last poll, I promise, and then we're gonna start doing some stuff. What is the technology access? That's a huge factor too. What technology is actually out there that they have access to? Because that can hinder, as we are learning now, a lot of students don't have access to like the internet, so they can't do the remote learning. So there's those types of things. So I should have sent a poll out about kind of just what do you know in your own personal school that your students have access to. I'll give everyone a couple more minutes to respond to that. I tried to come up with as many options as I could, so I probably forgot some, so that's where the other comes into play. Just a couple more minutes. There we go. It's about, not everyone, but pretty much everyone. So looking at the results, it shouldn't surprise you. And this is what I found when I was doing my own research, around the country, and is most teachers have a computer and a projector in their room, right? So that tends to be the tool they use the most. And in the math classroom, calculators are pretty prevalent in there. And then sometimes there's one-to-one. One-to-one's not actually as prevalent. It's probably maybe a little bit more now than when I was doing my research. But computers, or what do they call them, mobile laptop things, those were a little bit more prevalent. So lots of different options that teachers have, and you have to know what you have and what you can use in order to decide when you're going to actually integrate the math classroom. So I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm going to move on. So now we're going to actually get into how do you actually plan then. If you are a math teacher and you've decided I would like to integrate technology a little bit more, that's the first step. So the first thing you have to know is, what is your access? What kind of technology do you have access to? What do your students have access to? Because that determines how you're going to integrate. So I'm just going to kind of go through my background to show you how what I had access to changed how I did things in my classroom. So when I first started with the technology in the classroom, this was way back in, I was in a middle school, and I was told, you have 5 computers in your classroom now. And when I say 5 computers, this was the computers. I had to go find a picture of this, the Apple. Hopefully some of you will recognize this. I'm dating myself. But I was given 5 computers in my math class, in my middle school math class, and told, you need to use these. And I'm like, what do I do? This is like 1998. No, actually I think it was 1997. And so I found Sketchpad, Geometry Sketchpad happened to be on these 5 computers. And I didn't know what it was at the time. I explored it, I found out about it, I figured it out, and because I only had 5, and I had, 6 classes, 30 kids, I was like, how am I going to use 5 computers? I started doing portfolios and math centers. So twice a week, my students were assigned to centers, and we rotated through, and some of the centers was 2 or 3 students at a computer working on little projects, might be a geometry problem or an algebra problem, but using Sketchpad. So that's how I use my technology, and at that time, because that was the access that I had, was this, 5 computers. Then I moved to a high school in a different district, and this one I had computer lab. But of course, those of you who have taught as long as I have, back when we had computer labs, you had to share the computer lab with every subject and teacher in the school, right? So the English teachers tended to get it all the time, or the social studies. So I said, okay, I would like to be able to in there as much as possible, Sketchpad again. So I signed up at the beginning of the year, and for every Thursday for the entire year. My classes went every Thursday for the entire year. And so the way I integrated technology changed, because I knew every Thursday I was going to be in that lab. So I planned my lessons for that day around where I was. So sometimes we'd go into the lab and it might be a discovery lesson where the kids were, try this, answer these questions. Or it might be, well, we're kind of at the end of a unit, so now maybe it's an assessment activity. So I had to fit my curriculum around the day I had planned for technology. So that changed things. And then I moved to a district where I actually had a computer and a projector in my classroom and a computer lab. So I kind of did a combination. So now we still went to the lab once a week where they were hands-on, but then every day, not every day, but as much as I could, I tried to use the technology more as a whole class, demonstration, introduction, modeling, those types of things. And at the time, I won a grant, and I got myself a bunch of tools. So I got this really nice, powerful wireless mouse, which at the time was super exciting. And I would pass, so I wanted the kids to have hands-on still when I was in the classroom and not in the lab. And so I would pass the mouse to students, and they could then take control. So again, my axis changed how I integrated. So I was more, when I was in the classroom, I was more using technology as a demonstration or an introduction. And then when we were in the lab, they were hands-on practicing and discovering. And I tried to make this more discovery-based by giving them the mouse and the control and asking the questions. So the access that I had changed how I determined. And now I've been teaching online for, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years. And that changes, again, how I use and integrate technology. Now I'm online, and I use technology all the time because it is a much more visual tool for the learning, and I have great tools to use. So I use Classpad all the time with my Drexel students. And we can use pretty much everything in Classpad. I used Sketchpad before when that existed. It's now gone. So those types of things. So your access, and so that's something to think about. What is the access that you have? If you're teaching remote, now you have access to free online tools like Classpad, so how could you integrate that more effectively? So that is the first step in figuring out what you're going to do. Is what's the access that you have? What do your students have? If your students don't have their own laptops, if you're face-to-face, and they don't have access to hands-on, so then maybe you're going to be doing more demonstration. So that's the first step, is what is your access, and how is that going to impact the way you can present using technology? So what are the ways that you can use technology? There are lots of different ways. I am only listing the 4 that I tend to use the most in my mathematics instructions. If there's more that you want to share with everybody else, please put it in the chat panel. That would be fantastic. But for me, and this is from me personally and from my work with teachers around the country, that, because I've been doing this forever, working with technology and helping teachers integrate technology. For the one I see the most is that technology is used as a demonstration of the mathematics. So like you can do great visuals, and you can move things around, and you can model what you want students to do and show. So that's one of the biggest uses of technology, is as a demonstration of what they're learning. Another one is if the students, especially if the students get their hands on the technology themselves, is using it for exploration and discovery. This is my personal favorite because this to me is what good technology use is about, is students can manipulate and move things. This is where dynamic math comes into play. They can manipulate and move things themselves and figure out the rules instead of being told the rules or the skills or the relationships. They're moving and testing a conjecture immediately because they have the technology. So that's another way to integrate with technology. This one is one that comes up a lot. If you think about some of the math apps that are out there, math software that's out there, a lot of it is really practice, skill-based, where students are playing a game and they're trying their math, but they're really practicing their skills, and the technology is telling them if they're right or wrong and moving them in a different direction or awarding them a prize. So practice is another use of technology that is often seen in mathematics. And finally, assessment. So assessment, and by assessment, yes, online tests. That's not exactly what I mean is in terms of assessment. Assessment for me with good technology is you ask them a question and they can use technology in lots of different ways to model and justify their reasoning. So I'm going to give you some examples right now. So I'm going to go into Classpad.net and just kind of show you what I mean by these 4 things. And then we're going to, in a minute, in a little bit, we're going to actually go into Classpad, all of us together, hopefully, if you all opened your Classpad.net accounts. And we're going to actually talk about how do you plan for these types of instructional activities or actions. So let me just go into, I just made this up. I want to just kind of show you what I meant by these 4 different ways. You might have slightly different meanings, so I wanted to clarify what I meant. So by demonstration, a lot of times, there's lectures and teachers talk about, and they're trying to help students, learn a new concept. And having technology that allows you to visualize it or demonstrate for students, especially in an online environment. So a lot of teachers are doing remote work now. So Classpad.net is a nice tool because you can do a lot of different things. I'm only showing you a snippet here. There is another webinar, I forget when it is, 2 weeks maybe, where I'm actually going to go more into how do you get students learning this. But this right here is what I mean by a demonstration, using technology to demonstrate or to model. So let's say I'm in a geometry class and we're learning about the different types of transformations. I might have an image, and all I want to do is demonstrate, for example, what a translation is. And so technology allows me to very quickly model and demonstrate and show visually what I mean by a translation. Here's this object, this 4-sided quadrilateral, and I am moving it up, down, left, right, and this is called a translation. And I could even ask my students, how would you describe what a translation? What is it doing to the object? So this is a demonstration then using technology that allows you to do it very quickly and easily and visually. You could also model, or how do you want them, when we say show your work, how do you want them to show your work? What do you mean by that? And so let's say I was asking students to solve this equation for X using their addition, multiplication, and inverse properties, right? So I want to model the process when I mean show your work, justify your reasoning. So maybe this is the problem. And so as a teacher, students are watching online or they're in my classroom face-to-face, I can now show them what I mean. I want you to use your properties to solve this problem. So they know, hopefully, that they're inverse properties. So I know that if I add the additive inverse of -5, I can, and I'm using Classpad. I'm in the text box. For those of you not familiar with Classpad, I'm in what's called a text box right now, and I'm using the math type that is available. But to show this idea of adding the same thing to both sides, right, equivalent, and now I'm going to show them also that this is modeling the associative property, right? So I added the same thing to both sides, but I can group these together because I know that when I group these additive inverse, what do I end up with? I end up with, whoops, that's in the wrong place. Sorry about that. I end up with 0, so I'm using my at, and so as a teacher, I might be modeling this. I'm talking that -5 plus 5 are additive inverses. They make a 0 pair. And so now I'm left with 2/3 x, and then I can add these together, right, associative property. 3 plus 5, I have 8. And so now I know, because of my additive identity, that 0 plus 2/3 is the same as just 2/3 x. So now my next step might be to rewrite this as 2/3. So what I'm modeling here is the process, but as I talk through it, I am also using my properties. So this is what I'm trying to help students understand, is that, you know, you're not just showing your work, you're actually explaining why. So maybe they have to write it off to the side. So now how do I isolate the x? Well, I need the multiplicative inverse of 2/3. So I now know, using my properties, that that is 3/2 times 2/3. And I have to do it on the same on both sides, but I also know that I can make the 8 be a fraction, a rational number, because I know that property. And so this is modeling. So this is this is what I mean by demonstration or modeling, helping students see and hear what's going on using the technology. I'm not going to finish this problem. I'm going to assume you all know the answer to that. The second one that I talked about was exploration and discovery. This, to me, is the most exciting part of technology, especially dynamic types of technology like Classpad.net. I can actually give something to students. So maybe I send them this activity in a URL, and I say, okay, I want you to use this and explore, and here's the questions, here's what I want you to do. I want you to explore it on your own, write down your answers, tell me what you've done, and then we're going to come back together. So if you're in a face-to-face environment, you could have them all, you know, grouped by pairs and working on a laptop or a iPad, tablet together. If you're in a remote environment, you could send them all off, you know, send this to them, they all work individually, and then they come back and we discuss it as a whole. So there's lots of ways to use this. So this is an exploration or a discovery type of use. So notice that this is a graph. So I've got the parent function in blue, and I've got the linear function here, but using a variable for the coefficient instead of a number. And these sliders up here, which I'm going to change the steps. So this is a dynamic software, Classpad.net. You can make sliders. And so now it says right here, move A and B, and what do you notice? So the first thing what they're going to do is, you know, they're just going to move it and see what happens. And wow, moving it to negative switched the order, or moving it to positive made it a little more tilty. So like things like this, they might be noticing. And same thing with B. What does moving B do? Well, it moves it up and down. And then they're challenged. How could you make it land on top of the blue? So then, you know, they explore that. And in the process of exploring, they are hopefully understanding that A determines the slope, maybe then we give it that meaning, and B moves the line up and down compared to the parent. So this is what I mean by an exploration or a discovery, where instead of me telling them that that coefficient in front of the X is the slope, they figure it out themselves, and they're going to remember it more because they've done it themselves. So lots of ways to do it. So that's what I mean by an exploration or discovery using technology. And you can do this with, you know, calculators as well. Graphing calculators, the Casio ones have all of this kind of sliders and modify thing that you can do as well. The third one, practice. This is probably the one that is most used for technology, especially if you have like a math app that's just really practicing your addition or your subtraction. But in the Classpad environment, maybe you have given them a set of numbers and you're practicing finding the mean, median, mode, and range, something like that. So you are expecting them to go through the process maybe. So this is just, you know, how do you find the mean? So they could use this calculate sticky and actually show you their work by showing you that they are adding all the numbers up. I'm not going to actually do it, but I will add some of them just so you can see. So you as a teacher, they're practicing what they learned and then they're checking their answers, but you can see their work here. So they're using the technology to help them do the work, right? So this is what I mean by a practice. So that's probably the most common use of technology. And the last one is assessment. So yes, there's online assessments, you know, the SAT, the ACT, PARC, all those types of things. But what I mean assessment from a teaching point of view is really using the technology to get students to do lots of different things. And if you have technology, you can make your assessment so much more robust than a yes/no answer or a simple calculation. So I wanted to just show you that using technology like Classpad.net, you can make your assessments a lot more interesting. So here's some data, and their directions are you need to create 3 different representations of that data. So they get to decide what they're going to do. How could they represent this data? Well, it's already in a table, one representation. So maybe they want to make a graph of it. So they could do it a couple different ways. They could pull up you know, a graph sticky and plot the points themselves, right? So they could plot the points and they would appear on their thing. They'd have to change this window, obviously. So maybe they make their own plot of the points, right? Or maybe they have worked with Classpad and they say, well, I know I can make a scatter plot of the data. And so, oops, here's a scatter plot of the data. So they let the computer make the scatter plot. And now maybe I use that, where did it go? I think I just hit it. Sorry, let me do that again. I hit. So for those of you not familiar with Classpad, when you have data, it's very easy to select the variables and do a lot of statistical you can do calculations, regressions, graphs. So let's say I want one of my representations to be a scatter plot. And so here's my scatter plot. And so then maybe, okay, so I have a scatter plot. I got this funny number over here. Maybe now I use some of the points and make an equation as another representation that fits on top of my data. So they can think about that. And so this is what I mean by assessment. And then they have to explain, you know, what does each representation show you? Is there a relationship? How is one different from the other? So that's what I mean by assessment, is where they actually are really using their technology to explain and justify their thinking about the information. So before I move on, any questions about this? Or does somebody have a different way that you could, something that I didn't come up? These are the 4 main ways that I think about using technology in Math Classroom, but I'm sure there's other. Anyone? Okay, if there's not, I'm going to move on. Yes, open-ended, exactly, Tom. I like technology because it allows the students to take the direction and the choice, but you obviously have to have taught that. All right, so I'm going to move on, and in a minute we're going to actually move into, we're going to get to the heart of the thing now, is planning and organizing. So if you are the teacher and you're thinking, I want to use technology in my classroom, how do I start? You do not start by looking at the technology, looking at activities first. You really need to plan where you're going to integrate technology before you start looking for activities or creating activities. So first thing, most important, is that you need to make sure you know your own curriculum, what you're teaching. And so if you're working with teachers, if you're a coach or something, they really need to understand their curriculum, how it lays out, what are their standards, because knowing that helps you know where a technology resource or a tool or an activity is going to fit in and what type of activity would work best. Would this standard work really well with an exploration for students? Or would this standard be better as maybe I want to do the assessment? So you really need to know your standards first. The next thing is you need to decide your technology goals ahead of time. So when I work with teachers, a lot of times they're like, I know I've been dictated that I have to integrate technology. So I want to do it every day. Well, that's unrealistic. So think about your goals depending on who you are. So if you're sitting there right now thinking, well, I'm not very good at technology, so don't try to do it every day. So maybe you decide, I'm going to try to integrate technology once a unit, or maybe once a week, or once every other week. Whatever it is, make that decision ahead of time, and then that helps give you some focus when you are actually trying to find activities and where they should fit. So once you've decided your goal, this right here is really important. Don't think about integration of technology lesson by lesson. Look at the whole unit first and decide where technology makes sense before you then go find a lesson to fit, right? So don't try, a lot of teachers fail because I think, oh, I want to use technology tomorrow, and they go find a lesson tomorrow and it doesn't work because they didn't plan ahead for it. Because planning ahead means you're thinking about what devices you're going to use. You know, are students going to be on their tablets? Are they going to be working whole class? Am I just going to be demonstrating? Am I going to be working in partners? It also lets you think about how you need to set up your class structure, especially in this online environment. How are you going to do it? So you need to look at your unit ahead of time, a whole unit first, before you decide where you're going to put your technology. So that's kind of the first step, in my opinion. And then this is key. Where does it make sense? A lot of teachers fail because they're trying to use technology all the time, every time, and it's not always necessary, and it's not always the most appropriate tool. Sometimes a pencil and a paper is the best tool for something. So you really need to be looking at your whole unit and where is it going to make more sense to do my activity. And so then if we go back to that slide that I had before, this is where you're thinking about, does it make more sense if I want to use technology on this particular lesson, or have this grade, does it make more sense to do it as a demonstration? I'm doing it, students are talking, I'm asking good questions. Or is it make more sense for me to give the students something to do, they discover it, we come back together and talk about it? Or is this better as an assessment? So this is what I'm talking about. Where does it make sense in connection to my units and my thinking? And this is something we need to remember. Technology should not just be used because you need to use technology, right? Technology should be enhancing the instruction or the learning, making it better. It shouldn't just be used because you happen to have it. So keeping that in mind, you want to make it work. Robin does make a very good point. People force their technology in and because they have it, and that's always, well, that's sort of what I'm talking about here. Just because you have it doesn't mean it's going to work for the learning. Your learning goals should always be your thing. So this right here, this is where we're going to go. We're going to go into Classpad in just a minute, I promise you. Organization. So all of this is really the idea that you need to plan for technology before you ever start teaching with technology. You need to plan for it and then figure out what technology resources. So you need to figure out how you're going to organize. So for those of you who are teaching right now, and for those of you who are going to be supporting teachers, I want you to just think about how the curriculum or the content is organized. So if you are in a high school, it's probably organized by subject matter. So if you're an algebra teacher, how are you going to organize? Are you going to organize by your content topics, or are you going to organize by the lessons within the content? So maybe there's 5 lessons on systems of inequality, so you're going to organize by that. Or maybe you are teaching 3 different subjects, so you're going to organize by your classes. First period, second period, third period, however that works for you. So you need to organize in the way that makes sense for you. So I want everyone right now to take a couple minutes, and if you are not a teacher, but you know a teacher, or you have a child and you know what grade they're going into, I want you to just think about how would you organize for what you are going to do, or what your student, if you were your child's teacher, what would you like them to be organizing their math around? And we are going to open, if you have not already done so, if you're going to play along with me, if you have not already done so, open up your Classpad.net. Now I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes to kind of gather their thoughts. And I'm going to hit new paper, because if you open Classpad.net, it looks like this if you're signed into your account. If I have some people on that are not signed into accounts, technically what I'm about to do, you can't do if you don't have an account, which is why I kind of hoped that you guys would sign up for your accounts ahead of time. But if you're signed into an account, you should have this little iCloud, this little cloud save, right? That's how you know the difference between signed in and not signed in. So I didn't mean to do that. So when you're signed into your account, this is what it looks like once you sign in. So hopefully everyone's there, because I'm gonna move on if not. And over here is your papers. So what I want to talk about now, the rest of the presentation, is really just showing you how to organize yourself first. So when you click this paper stack, is what we call it, it brings you to all the papers that you have done. Now, if you just created an account, you probably don't have anything here. I have a lot of things. And so you'll notice I have a bunch of folders. I actually went through and organized yesterday, so I was pretty proud of myself. So I've organized, because I don't teach in the public schools anymore, so I kind of organize just by kind of subject area, algebra, algebra 2, or like I work with districts, I have papers that are applied to them, and holiday. So I have a folder for just the things that kind of seem to go together, right? Folders are really easy to create. So I would like everybody right now, if you're in your account, so those of you who are working with me, we're going to learn how to create a folder. So I'm going to be using as my model, I'm going to pretend that I am teaching from the illustrative math curriculum. So this is a free open source curriculum. This happens to be the Kendall Hunt version of it. And so let's say that I'm an 8th grade teacher. And so I'm going to go into 8th grade. I'm not going to go through all this. And so you'll see that I have units, right? So if this were me, my curriculum, I would probably want to organize my folders by units and then by the lessons within the units, right? So I'm going to go back to my Classpad and create my first folder. So my first folder is my subject, which for me is 8th grade. So to create a folder, up here in the right-hand corner, you'll see this little, looks like a folder and it has a plus sign, and it is the Create Folder button, and that's how easy it is. You hit Create Folder, and then type in the title. So for me, I'm doing it by the subject I'm teaching, which is 8th grade. And I'm actually going to put illustrative math, because that's my curriculum that I am using as my sample here. You can use whatever you want. So everyone create at least your first folder, and all you have to do is hit OK, and you'll notice that folder then gets automatically bumped to the top, or it might be your very first folder if you haven't had a folder. So now I have this folder, and so now I want to create folders inside that for each of my units. So I need to go into the folder. So once you have a folder, you need to put, and you want to put stuff in it, you have to actually click that folder. So when I click the folder, so everyone click your folder, it now opens up what's in that folder. Well, I just created it, so there's nothing in my folder, right? If I go back to my curriculum, my pretend curriculum, I have 9 units, right? So I'm going to create one folder for each unit. I'm not going to do that now, but I'm going to tell you that that's what I would be thinking as a teacher trying to organize my thoughts. I would be creating one folder for each unit. So if you are an algebra teacher and you have, 10 topics and then lessons within those topics, you might have a folder for each topic, overall topic. So how do you create a folder inside of a folder? Well, you do it exactly the same way you created the folder. I'm in, so notice up here, this tells you what folder you're in. The 0 means I don't have anything in that folder right now. So I'm going to add, by creating another folder, a folder for it. Unit 1, and what was Unit 1 for me? We're going to say transformations. All right. So there's my Unit 1, and then I could do the same thing. I could add all 9 of them, so I'll just add one more. Let's do Unit 2. So it's very easy to add a folder. You just hit the folder, and Unit 2 is dilation similarity. All right, so we'll just say similarity. And again, I could add as many as I want. And so again, how you organize is what makes sense for you. So then I would even then go to the next level. So notice you can add folders, in folders, and in lots of subfolders. So I would then click on Unit 2, or actually I don't want Unit 2. If you want to go back, I want Unit 1. Now I'm in Unit 1, and how would I organize it? So Unit 1 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So maybe I would put 5 lessons in there. And so, or I'm looking at these, and this is where that suggestion of know your content, know your standards, know your curriculum. I know that rigid transformations is something I would definitely want students to use technology for as an exploration. So I know I'm going to have a technology lesson for rigid transformations. So I would definitely have a folder for that. I may not want angles in a triangle, or I may not, I don't even know what let's put it to work is. So I may not have a folder for this one because maybe I'm not going to use technology. So this is where you think about, well, this is going to work really nicely with technology. And so I definitely want a folder where I'm going to put some lessons that relate to properties of rigid transformations. Okay, so I'm going to just make one folder inside of my Unit 1, and we're going to call it rigid transformations. So maybe just what are they? All right, so any questions before I move on to the next thing, which is, okay, now you have all these folders, how do you find activities and put them in? Any questions about how to make folders? Pretty easy. And so this is where organization really matters, is know your units, think about how you're going to do it, and where do you want to, what kind of folder structure do you want? How, and where do you, I like to just put folders in the units of things I'm going to actually do technology on.
Hey, Karen, we did have a question. Can you make folders afterwards?
Those
and
are
how do you delete and maybe rename folders?
Perfect questions, and I'm hoping my pictures are. All right, so I'm in a folder right now. Actually, you know what, I'm going to go, so up here is sort of your folder management, and it's got all of my folders. I'm going to go to a folder that I know I have things in because it'll help me explain the answers a little bit better. So I'm going to go to my algebra folder because my algebra folder already has several folders within it. So notice every time you have something up here, you have these 3 dots. And so if I click the 3 dots when I'm near a folder, what are my options? I can move this folder to a different folder, right? So this curve fitting is in maybe not where I wanted it. Maybe I wanted it in Algebra 2. So when I hit move, it lets me move it anywhere else in my other folder. So that's how you move anything. I don't want to move it, so we're perfectly happy. I'm just going to go back there. And notice you can also rename the folder. So the 3 dots off to the side is the 3 dots that basically controls your papers, your folders, or anything. This is where you can make a copy of it. Maybe you want 2 of those folders or 2 of those activities. You can move it somewhere else. You can change the name of it. If you forgot to add tags, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second, tags are really important. Or if you decided that's a stupid thing, I didn't need it at all, you can hit delete. But if you delete a folder, it deletes everything that's in the folder, so be careful about that. Let me go into one of the folders here, and you'll see I actually have activities in my folder. So here's the activities that are in my equation. So I have 5 activities right now. And so it's the same thing. This is a separate activity or a paper. I still have the 3 dot options, and so I can still do the same thing. So the 3 dots off to the right to a folder or to a paper are where you can share it, duplicate it, move it, rename it, add tags, okay? This right here, sharing, which we're going to talk about in a minute, is how you get a URL. So if I hit share, this is how you can send it off to students. If you have an activity that you found or that you've created that you want students to do, you are going to share it by URL or public and send them the URL link. So this is where you can do that. You can do that here in paper management, or you can do it in the activity yourself if you're working in the activity. So notice these papers right here. This only happens with papers. It doesn't happen with folders because you can't share an entire folder. But the papers have these little icons. So this one has nothing, which means I haven't done anything to it. It's not shared. No one else can see it except me. This one has like a little link, and it tells you that this is being shared by URL. So I have to actually deliberately send the URL to somebody or post it on my Google page or put it on my website, put it in an email. This one right here means it's a public shared paper, meaning anyone in ClassPad can find that activity, which is what we're going to do right now. Let's say I am looking for another activity. I've decided I really need an activity that I want to do for my unit on equations, and I need another one. I want to find one. If you're in Classpad.net, you'll see over here that we have public papers, and those are all the papers by all the people who are using Classpad.net, and they've created and shared them. So I'm going to click that real quick. And notice that you get some samples that come up. Obviously, I'm here pretty often, Casio official. But if I don't see, this is just like the latest ones that have been added by some people. If I want to find something specific, and this is where tagging comes in. Whenever you create an activity and you want to share it, I suggest you put some tags in there. You know, keywords, what's the topic, whatever. So let's say I want something on, what was that, equations? So when I click that, so I hit the search button, I typed in a keyword, and it's bringing up all the activities I created. So notice up here, there's a bunch of tabs. It's bringing up all the papers that I've created that have that tag in it. But I want to look at public papers, something that others have created. And so here's all these activities that others have created that might be important, might be relevant. And so I want equations. I'm just going to randomly pick this one. I can open it up. So here's how you find papers to put in your folder. So don't reinvent the wheel. If you want to integrate technology and you're new to this, you don't reinvent the wheel. There's lots and lots of activities out there. Go find them. So this is an activity. It's got a word problem. They're going to create equations and inequalities. It looks like they're going to do a lot of graphing, and they have places to write their example. I love this activity. This is fantastic. So after you've searched for some activities and you decide you love them, notice there's no cloud here, because all you're doing is looking at this activity as a guest. But if you're in an account, you have permission, because it was publicly shared, to basically copy it. So I've found it, I looked at it, I love it. I'm going to go over here. So there's this little icon that basically says duplicate it, and I'm going to hit that and watch what happens. Doesn't look like anything changed. It's a little slow, a little unhappy with me. But now notice the cloud is here. So this means this is now my own copy of that activity. It is no longer public. It's now my version of it. And if I go into my papers, so I'm going to go into my papers. Okay, or maybe I'm not. I don't know what happened there. I timed myself out, maybe. Maybe. All right, let me. I must have timed myself out. Yeah, who knows? All right, so let's go back to my papers. That paper should now be there. So there's the paper that I copied. So notice if you duplicate it, it kind of throws it into your general area, and now you would go to your three dots and move it to the folder that you'd like it to be in. So what did I say? I think I said I wanted it in my algebra folder under equations. So that's the folder I wanted to. I say okay, and now they've moved it there. So that's sort of set up your organization first, and then go look for activities in the places where you think technology makes the most sense. You know, so I'm looking for an activity that I can demonstrate with to fit for this system of equations. So I'm looking at my time. I feel like I've run out. I'm pretty close. So are there any other questions? I have two more workshops or whatever, webinars coming up in 2 weeks, and then another week where I'm going to go much more in depth of how do you then, once you have activities, how do you share it with students? How do you help students learn technology, but also still learn math at the same time, those types of things. So I'm going to do more of this and in the future. I know this is very fast. but hopefully give you some idea of how to integrate some technology and think. It's really more about how to think about integrating technology first. That's the first step.
Well, this is a perfect segue, as Karen mentioned.
Exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
Here is our schedule. So as she mentioned, on August 20th and September 3rd, we will be taking a look at Classpad.net again and talking about I don't have time to teach them technology and working with students in dynamic activities. On the 16th and the 27th, we are going to be taking a look at our hardware. We launched a brand new graphing calculator, a black and white graphing calculator this summer, the 9750 G3, and then also taking a look at some of our other graphing calculator technology and kind of comparing it all there. So if you're interested at all in any of those, feel free to sign up for one of our webinars here. We also are doing a series on equity and education. So if you are at all remotely interested in some of those conversations, we've partnered with Todos and the Benjamin Banneker Association to have speakers and host speakers. So the next two in August are the 12th and the 26th. So please join us for those. And then lastly, we have a lot of stuff on social media. So this webinar has been recorded and will be up on our YouTube channel. So you can find that at youtube.com/classpad.net. So you can go there. And then also check us out on social media, as we will be posting other stuff and also resharing this. We will be sending a follow-up email tomorrow, so that link for the recorded webinar will go out in that as well. So if there are no more questions, thank you all for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate everyone's active involvement. It makes it a lot more engaging for me when you respond. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And have a good night.